Imagine the best job in the world. You work in a palace. You're surrounded by the finest food ever assembled in one place. Saffron flown in from Kashmir, mangoes carried by runners across half a subcontinent, meat spiced by cooks who've trained their entire lives for this one kitchen. And you get to eat all of it. First, before anyone else, before the most powerful man in the world. Sounds incredible, right? Now here's the catch. You're not eating it because you're special. You're eating it because if it's been poisoned, the emperor would very much prefer that you find out instead of him. Congratulations, you're a royal food taster, and today we're going to find out exactly why it sucked to be you. Hi, I'm Bachara Mohan, and on this channel we take the worst, grimmest, most unfortunate jobs in history and ask one simple question. How bad was it? Really? And today we're going somewhere genuinely spectacular. The Mughal court. We're talking roughly the 1500s to the 1700s. Emperors like Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan. These were some of the richest, most powerful rulers on the planet. The Mughal Empire at its peak controlled a huge chunk of the Indian subcontinent and an economy that staggered visitors from across the world. And when you are that rich and that powerful, you have a lot of enemies. Rival princes, ambitious nobles, brothers who'd quite like the throne for themselves. And in the Mughal world, brothers wanting the throne was less of a risk and more of a tradition. So how do you kill a man who lives behind walls, surrounded by guards, with an entire army between him and the world? You don't go through the army, you go through his lunch, and standing between the emperor and his lunch was our guy, the food taster, the single most nervous employee in the entire empire. Let's get into it. To understand why this job existed, you have to understand how deeply, profoundly worried Mughal emperors were about being poisoned. And honestly, they had every reason to be. Poison was the perfect weapon in a royal court. It was quiet. It was deniable. You didn't need to be a warrior or sneak past guards with a knife. You just needed access to the kitchen, a bribe, and patience. A cook, a servant, a spice merchant. Any one of them could be working for someone who wanted the emperor dead. And the thing about poison in this era is that nobody could test for it. There was no lab, no chemistry. If your soup was laced with something deadly, there was exactly one way to find out. Someone had to eat it and see what happened. That someone was not going to be the emperor. So the Mughals built an entire system around this fear. The royal kitchen, and this is real, was treated almost like a military operation. There was a whole department devoted to the emperor's food, overseen by a high-ranking official. In Akbar's court, the kitchen was run with the kind of paperwork and supervision you'd expect from a treasury, because in a sense, that's what it was protecting, the most valuable life in the empire. And at the bottom of all that grand machinery, doing the part nobody else wanted to do, was the taster. Here's the part that really gets me. The taster wasn't some random, unlucky peasant grabbed off the street. Tasting was often done by trusted people, sometimes the cook himself, sometimes specific officials whose entire job was to verify the food. Because think about it. If you're going to trust someone to be the early warning system for poison, you need them to actually be paying attention. A terrified stranger might just lie and say, "Tastes great," to get it over with. So the taster had to be loyal, reliable, and willing to put a spoon in their mouth every single day, knowing it might be the last thing they ever tasted. Let's walk through an actual day, because the routine is where it gets exhausting. It starts long before the emperor is hungry. The ingredients arrive, and they're not just dumped in a kitchen. They're guarded. The food that reaches the royal kitchen had to be vouched for at multiple stages. Where did this come from? Who handled it? Can we trust them? Every link in that chain was a potential weak point, and every link had someone watching it. Then the cooking happens, under supervision. And here's a detail I love. In the Mughal system, once a dish was prepared, it would be sealed. The pots and dishes were tied shut and sealed with a cloth and the seal of the kitchen official, so that between the kitchen and the emperor's mouth, nobody could tamper with it. If the seal was broken when it arrived, something was very wrong. But a seal only protects the food after cooking. It doesn't protect against a cook who poisoned it while cooking. And that's where you come in. The food is tasted. Before it goes to the emperor, someone eats a portion of every single dish. Not a polite nibble. Enough that if there's poison in there, it'll do to the taster what it was meant to do to the emperor. And now comes the worst part of the whole job, the waiting. Because most poisons don't work instantly. You don't take a bite and immediately drop. So after you've tasted everything, there's this horrible little window where you just stand there, feeling fine, hoping you continue to feel fine, wondering if that slightly bitter aftertaste in the third dish was a spice or a death sentence. Wondering if today's the day your stomach starts to cramp in front of the most powerful man in the world, every single meal. The emperor ate multiple times a day. Imagine doing this at breakfast, feeling relieved, and then realizing lunch is in a few hours and you get to do the whole thing again, and then dinner, forever, until you either die of poison or, more likely, just die of stress. We talk a lot about stressful jobs today. Air traffic controller, surgeon, bomb disposal. The Mughal food taster looked at a plate of biryani the way a bomb disposal expert looks at a suspicious briefcase. Except the bomb disposal guy gets to go home. Our guy has to come back at dinner time and disarm the dessert. So what exactly was the taster on the lookout for? Let's talk about the menu of horrors. The classic fear was arsenic. And arsenic was genuinely terrifying for one reason. It's nearly undetectable in food. No strong taste, no smell, dissolves into a dish without a trace. It was so associated with royal murder in various courts around the world that it picked up nicknames like the Poison of Kings and the King of Poisons. A slow dose could be mistaken for a long illness. A big dose could look like sudden food poisoning. Perfect for an assassin, nightmarish for a taster, because the whole point of arsenic is that you can't taste it. So what exactly is the taster supposed to catch? Honestly, sometimes the answer is nothing. Sometimes the taster wasn't a detection system at all. He was a deterrent. The whole ritual existed so that anyone thinking about poisoning the food knew they'd have to get it past multiple people first, and that someone would visibly drop dead before the emperor took a bite, raising the alarm and ruining the whole plan. In other words, part of your job was to be a warning light, and warning lights, by design, are the thing that breaks first. There were other fears too. Plant-based poisons, things slipped into wine. There's a long tradition across many royal courts of poisoners getting creative, poisoning one side of a knife so the cutter is safe, but the guest is not. Poisoning a single piece of fruit in a bowl. The paranoia got incredibly sophisticated, which meant the countermeasures had to get sophisticated too. And the most sophisticated countermeasure of all was still, at the end of the day, a human being with a spoon and a prayer. Now, were emperors actually poisoned? This is where you should do your own reading, because history and legend get tangled. Royal deaths were constantly rumored to be poisonings, whether they were or not. A king dies suddenly? Poison? A prince falls ill on campaign? Poison. Sometimes it was true. Often it was just the easiest story to believe in a world where poison really did happen. But here's the thing. It almost doesn't matter whether poisonings were common. What matters is that everyone believed they could happen at any moment. And that belief is what kept our taster employed, terrified, and chewing. Let's say you survive the poison risk. You're a careful taster. The kitchen is loyal. Nobody's trying to kill the emperor this week. You're still not safe. Because working that close to absolute power is dangerous in a dozen other ways. First, the emperor's mood. When you serve a god king whose word is law, every interaction is a small gamble. If the food is bad, too salty, gone cold, badly spiced, somebody is going to answer for it. And the people closest to the food are the most convenient people to blame. You didn't poison anything, but if the emperor's in a foul mood and the lamb is dry, the food people are right there. Second, palace politics. Royal courts were snake pits of rival factions. If you're a trusted servant near the emperor, you're a useful target. Maybe a rival noble wants their man tasting the food instead of you, because a loyal taster is a position of trust and access. The safest-sounding jobs near the throne were often the ones people quietly knifed each other to control. Third, and this is the dark irony, you could become the weapon. Think about it from an assassin's point of view. Who has guaranteed, daily, trusted access to the emperor's food? The taster. If someone could bribe, threaten, or blackmail you, you go from the emperor's shield to the emperor's greatest vulnerability. Which means you weren't just watched by the people protecting the emperor. You were watched as a suspect every day by everyone. Imagine going to work knowing that your loyalty is permanently under suspicion precisely because you're trusted. There's no winning. If nothing happens, you're invisible. If something happens, you're the first suspect and possibly the first corpse. So the food taster lived in this exhausting middle zone, important enough to be watched, expendable enough to be sacrificed, trusted enough to be suspected. It's the kind of job security where the security is the part that might kill you. Which brings us to the obvious question. If this job was a daily flirtation with death, stress, and suspicion, why would anyone take it? And the answer is actually kind of fascinating, because it tells you a lot about how power worked. Proximity. In a royal court, closeness to the emperor was the single most valuable currency there was. Forget money, access was wealth. The people who were physically near the emperor every day, who he saw, who he relied on, were people who could rise. A trusted servant could be rewarded with gifts, land, titles, status that would be unthinkable for an ordinary person. You ate with, before, the emperor. You were part of the most exclusive inner circle on the subcontinent, and there was honor in trust. To be chosen as someone whose loyalty guards the emperor's life was, in its grim way, a mark of enormous status. Your family could be elevated by it. In a world with very few ladders out of ordinary life, the emperor trusts me with his life every single day was a real, if terrifying, ladder. For some, it might have been hereditary, or tied to a particular community or household, a role you were born into or brought into through service, not something you exactly applied for. And once you were in that world, the rewards of staying close to power could outweigh the very real chance of an early, foamy-mouthed exit. So you took the job. You learned the routine. You ate first. You waited. You survived another meal. And you told yourself the gold and the status and the proximity to greatness were worth it. And maybe, on the good days, they were. But every single day, somewhere in the back of your mind, was that one quiet thought that never fully went away. What if today's the day the soup tastes a little off? So, how bad was it to be a royal food taster for a Mughal emperor? You had one of the most prestigious positions in one of the richest empires in human history. You ate the finest food ever made. You stood at the very center of power, trusted with the most important life in the land. And in exchange, You turned every meal into a coin flip with your own life. You volunteered to be the empire's smoke detector, fully aware that smoke detectors exist to be the first thing to go off. You were watched as a hero and a suspect at the same time, and you did it again at lunch and again at dinner. Day after day after day, chewing your way through a lifetime of low-grade terror, hoping your stomach stayed quiet. So the next time you're eating dinner, cold leftovers, nothing fancy, nobody's tried to assassinate you all week, take a second to appreciate it. Because somewhere in history, a man named, let's say, Bechara, took a bite of a perfect royal feast and then just stood there, waiting, hoping. Bechara indeed. If you enjoyed suffering vicariously through history's unluckiest people, you know what to do. Subscribe and feel a little better about your own bad day. I'm Bechara Mohan. Stay unlucky. I'll see you in the next one.